SQL Server 1, right click, open, change adapter settings, double click, properties, uncheck, check 4, properties, and now we want to join that domain, so we go use this, and remember the IP address that we want to allocate. Previously, remember, we allocated 50 to the domain controller, and this is going to be one more. So this is going to be 192. Let me look at the numlock here. 192.168.0.51 and subnet mask. Remember, our default gateway was 192.168.0.1. Our preferred DNS was 127.0.0.1. And the alternate is, now I want you to redirect this to the domain server or the controller so it can resolve the DNS. So 192.168.0.50. Oops, .50. And that will hopefully join the domain. So let me just repeat what I did here. This is a standalone server, and I'm about to join a domain. I'm going to give it an IP address, and the IP address next in sequence was 51. My default gateway was 192.168.0.1, and again, for the alternate DNS, I'm pointing it to the domain controller so it can resolve the DNS names. And DNS is basically resolving SQL.com for this IP address. Let's go OK, close, and close. And I'm going to restart. But if you can see here, I'm going to restart these services here. So I can go here, I believe. Or let me just go over here. Look at that for a second. And I'm just going to power this off. And we're going to restart it. And then hopefully when it comes back, it should have joined the SQL, or it will have the appropriate IP address it can resolve, and then we can join the domain. So let's see if we can do that in a second. So I'm going to power it off, power it on, right click, oops, or select it, start. Let's kill that. That's okay. We'll take a few seconds. Because we changed the IP addresses, it's just taking a few seconds to resolve that. So these are the things that you have to be aware of when you're resolving issues. Now this may take a few minutes here. So let's go to input, keyboard, and let's add in and password. And let's look at the IP address of this. Go OK. And now one thing I want you to note is this. Go to your, well, let's see, go to your server manager. Left click this icon right here. Give it a second. I just want to verify that the firewall is still turned off, because that's always problematic when you're trying to join a domain and it's turned back on. So go back to local server. So we want to verify this before we get long. And it's off, so that's good. So let's close this and open this. Right click, properties. Now if this doesn't work, I'll show you another way of doing it. Change domain SQL.com. Okay. Okay, let me look at the details here because the DNS doesn't exist here. So I'll see how we can do that, and I'll come back in a second and show you how do I resolve this. And we're back. I guess the only thing is it doesn't like the .com, so just press SQL and go OK. And type in the domain name. Remember, the computer name and domain changes. So it's SQL /administrator. Type in the password. Let's just double check. And if everything went well, we should have joined the domain. If not, we'll solve the problems. And this part of the responsibility of DBA to resolve issues. That's what we get paid for, not necessarily doing the redundant things over and over again. It's when we have a problem, they look to us. So let's see if we join the domain. If not, then we may have to create what's called a domain user account and use that. But this does take a few seconds, so we may have joined it, and hopefully we can see a welcome sign. Still working. Okay, let me look at that, and I'll be back in a second. So it could be just the administrator password. And we're back, and as you can see, we've got that wonderful little pop-up that we wanted to see, which is welcome to the SQL domain. The issue, it seems, is that when you, as I mentioned, we need to start it. Let's go OK. Restart now. The issue is, as I mentioned, is when you're joining a domain and when you're allocating an IP address, you have to restart the services. Sometimes it takes, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to do it a couple of times if that happens. So again, if you're, the first thing I want you to do is provide the IP address to the NIC card. Once you've done that, restart your computer and restart the process again. And then you can join it. So now we're going to be a part of the SQL domain, and that's where we want to be. So as I mentioned, and then the other thing is I did look at my firewall. It was turned off, so that's a good thing, at least there. So now let's go back to device input, and let's just double check a few things. Now you'll notice here that this is a local here. The admin. What I want to do is actually join the SQL domain. So what you want to do is go over here and actually go other user. And in this case, in order to join a domain, you have to type in SQL to sign in SQL. So we can go administrator and password. Administrator and go join. And now this second server standalone is part of now the SQL server. And if I go here, you'll see that we can have SQL.com. So now we've joined the SQL server environment, or SQL domain, I should say. And that's what we want. So the next thing we're going to do now is, let's just verify it. Open this. Right-click computer. Properties, and you can see now that we're part of the SQL domain. And a couple of things we want to make sure is that the firewall is still turned off. So let's just verify that. And one of the issues you're going to have as an SQL DBA is to resolve issues, as I mentioned. So never give up on a problem. That's the most important thing I can do, is give you that kind of encouragement. You'll feel a lot better about yourself once you resolve issues. But I understand you're learning, and that's fine. So if this is off, we're good. See, this is what I mean. It comes back on when you join the domain. So we want to deactivate this particular part here. So that's why you want to double check everything, and now we're okay. And you may want to even restart the services here. But at this point, we're good, and we can restart the services. So now we have two instances. One is the domain server, the domain controller, And one is the standalone server, which is this, which is now part of that domain as we just verified. And now what we're going to do now next is install SQL Server on this instance so we can start learning about SQL Server. And that's the whole point of the series of videos that we have done and we're going to do. So I think I'll leave it here and we'll continue. So remember the issue. If you're having an issue joining the domain, it's most likely the firewall is turned off. So go back to the firewall and turn it off and disable it. And or make sure you restart the services, reboot the services and the computer if you have to. So I think I'll leave it here and we'll continue the next one where I'm going to install SQL Server here. And I'm going to show you a property of virtual machine where you can actually share, do what's called shared folders. If I minimize this and click on this, you'll notice that initially I asked you to, let me go to downloads. Initially, when we downloaded all our applications, they were downloaded to your document download folder on your local machine, not on the VM. So now the question becomes, how does this VM, this server 1 right here, how does this access this folder? And that's what I'm going to show you, how to set up a shared folder. So anything on your desktop can be viewable and shared on your VM. So that's the next thing. Let's just verify that's what we need to do, I believe. Well, we're going to install this first, but we need to do that. We need to do a share. So I think I'll leave it here and we'll continue with the next video. So my name is Rafael and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video.